Good morning. It's Thoughts from the Past this time again. I'm sitting on my balcony at home as the sun rises again. It's a great spot for some thoughts. And this morning I wanted to tell you a story. It's a story of about a series of 7 nights in a row, often between 12 midnight and 12:30 in the morning. I received phone calls, and this is how the phone call went. Hello, this is Central Monitoring. There's been an alarm set on the Carlingford Road door entry and a system fault recorded. So for me, that requires struggling and bumbling to find my phone first, then realising I've got my CPAP mask on, so I have to rip that off. But before I take that mask off, I have to turn off the machine, and so I feel for the button on the machine. Then I stumble to try and find my glasses, fiddling around, which usually end up on the floor as I fiddle, and this is all before I answer the phone call. It got to the stage where after the 3rd or 4th phone call at that time of the morning, having come down the first 2 nights to the church to check the door to make sure there was no intruder, to return home having reset the alarm and try to get back to sleep. It usually occurred when it was windy, which seemed very odd, but just said to me as a non-technical person, it must be a loose wire. Eventually I called the installation company, asked them to come and do a service call, and the night before that I contacted Central Monitoring and said, please don't call me, I do want to get a good night's sleep. The alarm will not be set tonight, so please ignore any warnings that says the alarm needs to go on. At 12:15 that next morning I received a phone call. Good morning, this is Central Monitoring. Unfortunately, the alarm has not been set last night. I know, I told you that. Anyway, long story short, the installation company came. Tim Coates came down to help because we knew this was obviously a property issue. And as Tim is part of the property team and heads the volunteer property team at the church, he accompanied the installation man as we walked out to the Carlingford Road door to inspect what was this critical issue in regards to the wiring of the alarm system at that place. As soon as the installation man arrived in that area, he said, I know the problem. Do you? We both looked at the alarm, unable to see what on earth the problem was. There was no obvious wires sticking out anywhere. He said, can you see that up on the sensor? No. What do we see? He said, there's a little tiny spider that's made its web right across the sensor. We looked and saw, and sure enough, this little tiny black spider had made its home across the sensor of the alarm system. I'm talking little tiny spider. So we flipped that down, and I have to confess, that little spider is now squashed well and truly into the carpet of the church. 7 nights of being interrupted with sleep and lots of frustrations were dealt on that little black spider. That small, tiny, incy spider disrupted so much of my life for those 7 nights. Set off a whole alarm system. The reason why, on windy nights particularly, it set the alarm off, because the little spider got disturbed and so wiggled across in front of the sensor. Amazing. Frustrating, but amazing. At the moment, lots of people in this time of restriction are buying a couple of items that have resulted in shortages. No, I'm not talking toilet paper and paper towel or tissues. I'm talking flour, plain flour, and yeast. It's become a real thing to be making bread during this time of isolation, a new skill perhaps. So I wanted to show you What creates a loaf of bread? Apart from flour and water, there's one little ingredient, and I'll show you what it is. Can you see that? Shall I bring it closer? You still can't see it? It's yeast. That tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of yeast that obviously use a lot more than just one tiny grain of yeast, I guess it's called a grain, to make a loaf of bread. But there is a lot of the yeast granules, I guess you'd call them, in a packet of yeast, and yet it makes an amazing thing that we eat. I guess small things can cause a lot of damage, a lot of harm, but they can also be used for good. And I think of that in terms of that little tiny black spider, the piece of yeast. But there's one thing that Jesus talked about, and he likened that to the way we live as a disciple of Jesus. There's a mustard seed, another tiny little thing that creates a huge bush. And it's all about faith, isn't it? See, the tiny spider, the piece of yeast, the mustard seed, small, tiny, insignificant things, and yet can have such tremendous impact. And during my mission month, we're talking about Jesus and the impact in communities around the world, and the impact particularly on people's lives. I don't know if you've seen the Global Interaction movie In Step, but if you haven't, make sure you go to attend that missions night at the end of this month, where it'll be screened, the story of a Muslim man who came to faith in Jesus. And how did it begin? By someone stepping out in faith. That tiny, tiny little ingredient in our Christian life that has such tremendous impact. See, what COVID has reminded us is that we rely on so many things which have no eternal value. And the things that people have been blessed by during this time are family, spending time at home, creating memories with family members and friends. As we trust not on the things of this world, which are so finite. In Matthew, Jesus says this: I tell you the truth, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. You see, nothing is impossible for us as members of Epping Baptist Church. We're isolated from each other, yes we are, physically at least. But our faith hasn't changed, has it? Hopefully our faith is getting stronger as we rely on God, as we rely on what we know as the foundations of our life, which is a belief in Jesus Christ. And as we think about this environment in which we live, let's remember to use our faith that we've been blessed with to reach out to others. To be like that little black spider that I found so irritating, but become not an irritation, but a blessing. I mean, this whole situation is caused by what? A tiny virus. You can't see the virus. We've got pictures of the virus. We know what the makeup of them are supposed to look like, but we can't see those little viruses hopping from one person to another. An invisible virus in many ways, and yet one which has had tremendous impact. Let's catch that virus of Jesus again. Let's refresh and renew our faith in him. And however long we are going to be apart, as restrictions are loosened, just help us to remember that people need Jesus. Maura Solomon made that comment last week in Midweek Musings, didn't she? Saying this world needs Jesus, and this world needs us to be Jesus. So hold on to your faith, trust in him, and let's make a difference in this world. Thanks for listening. See you soon.